is the Rat Alert. Civil defense information will be broadcast at 6:40.
West of the Rockies, you're on the air. Hello.
Y2K, how can we prepare?
Stop a few of their machines and radios. Throw them into darkness for a few hours.
We are fighting for our lives. My family must survive.
Over 5 years, 1,000 gallons of gas, air filtration, water filtration.
Coming at you from the frozen tundra that is East Central Alberta, Canada. Streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Rumble, and Odyssey. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. I am Toolman Tim. Today is October the 29th, 2023. This is episode 390 of Workshop Radio. Or welcome back to Ghoulman Tim presents the Workshop of Horrors. We finally come up with a name. Welcome back to the spooky season. This is the second of 3 Halloween-themed episodes we're going to be having here on Workshop Radio. The one I did the other night with Rob and Tracy was super well received. Thank you, guys. I loved it. We had a lot of fun. We could have went forever. Tonight is going to be our homage, our nod to the late, great Art Bell from Coast to Coast AM. Every Halloween, if you don't know the story, he would rename his show Ghost to Ghost AM. And when you look back on Art Bell and his well thought of, well revered, and super popular in the 90s Coast to Coast AM, when he decided to take a turn toward the paranormal, the unexplained, that sort of thing, that's when his show really took off. And if it wasn't paranormal enough, like I said, once or twice every Halloween, he would put together Ghost to Ghost, where he would open up the phone lines, he would take faxes, emails as the time went on, and share unexplained, odd, strange stories that would focus around all the fun things. Tonight, so here we go. This is what we're going to do in a few minutes once we get the announcements out of the way. We're going to open up the phone lines, as you guys love. One Step Closer just said, scariest thing I ever saw was a letter from the IRS. Amen to that, brother. So we're going to open up the phone lines in just a moment, and we're going to, anybody who wants to come on live, I have a plethora of unexplained, interesting, odd phenomena stories to share with you tonight. So if nobody comes on, which you will, I know you will, but we have lots to share. So we're going to open it up. You can come on. You can talk about aliens. You can talk about ghosts. You can talk about unexplained, true crime. I tell you, Bigfoot, Yeti, whatever you want to call it, the Jersey Devil, I would love to hear about it. But more than that, here's how it goes. The only requirement for tonight is that it has to be a true story, or true as far as you've experienced it or been told it. Other than that, for the most part, anything goes. We will keep a short leash on crank callers this evening. If anybody happens to pop in, gone just like that. And yeah, so in a moment, I will post the StreamYard join link, and you guys can pop in the background. If we get busy, we're going to limit it to 10 minutes. And if we aren't too busy, then we'll kind of roll with it and see where the ghosts of AM radio past take us. So real quick, guys, I was talking to my friend earlier today, Amy Dingman of A Farmer's Kind of Life. She is this evening's sponsor. And what a wonderful friend. She shared a really funny story with me earlier today that I'm going to keep between us, but it meant a lot to me, the fact that she would reach out and share it to me. So if you guys are looking to get motivated, she might be a little nicer than I am. I don't know. It'd be pretty close, but she is the type that will motivate you in bite-sized pieces. So her episodes are running kind of in the 15-minute range at this point. And this week's episode, or topic of her episode, was, when is enough enough? When do you decide that you have enough and you don't have to strive for more? Really interesting topic that we don't talk about nearly often enough. Cabot Porter says, first or secondhand story? Yes. Yeah. I mean, you're going to hear a couple of personal stories from my family that have become kind of, I don't know, part of the furniture around here. They're pretty good stories. They're as true as I can allow them. That's all I ask. It's just no intentional jokes. That's all I'm looking for this evening, because we are going to be spooky. And of course, kids or those who are faint of heart should definitely walk away from the radio, walk away from the TV, walk away from YouTube, and come back when we're talking about less scary stuff after this evening. Next, Patch of the Month Club, guys. I haven't plugged that in a while. I need to do a little bit better, but I really do appreciate it. We've been picking up subscribers recently, but if you go to patchofthemonth.co and subscribe, it's $10 a month, $100 a year. You will get a patch in the mail, Velcro, 2x3, usually politically incorrect, sometimes a little bit on the edgy side, which I appreciate. And ours is running just a little late this month. I had to get them to redo it. It's supposed to be here by Wednesday, and it'll be out immediately after that. So I cannot wait to get them out to you folks. And finally, if you're wondering, I get this a lot. Hey, Tim, do you recommend a product? Have you tried this? Have you tried that? Yes, I do. Yes, I have. Maybe I haven't. I don't know. But the pinned post in YouTube this evening, and it will be in the podcast notes, is toolmantim.shop. And that is where I have a link to most of what I have used that I have recommended on Amazon. So there you go. And with that, guys, I'm going to throw up here, that sounded really funny, the StreamYard link. So it is now in the comments. If anybody would like to grab it, if you haven't done this before, all you have to do is click on the link, put your name in, and click Join Studio. I will see you in the background. I will bring you on. And like I said, share your story, and we will go from there. So, you know what, guys? We're going to start. Of course, the scariest stories come from your childhood. And it is something that growing up on the East Coast, near the Atlantic Ocean, basically on the Atlantic Ocean, we had lots of interesting stories. There were stories like when I was a kid, a teenager, I used to hang out at a local used music and bookstore, and it was just absolute. I loved it. Loved hanging out there. And the dude, this is kind of to see where these local stories come from. But one day, the guy, Phil is his name, still alive, great dude. And he said, there's an elephant buried out in Larchie's field. And I said, bullshit, there isn't. And he said, yeah, no, there is. And turned out, we didn't believe him. But one day, the traveling circus came through town. This was in the either late 1800s, early 1900s. They had an elephant with them. And while they were in town, the elephant got sick. And whether it died or it was dispatched while it was there, they dug a great big hole, put the elephant in, and buried it. We didn't believe it. So we went out and started exploring. Now, we didn't dig up an elephant carcass, but we did find a couple of spots in that field that would have had a really large depression where the ground had settled, and found where we assume was probably the skeleton of an elephant. I would love to see. I'd love to see it dug up someday. But anyway, that's how those stories started. So in junior high, senior high, I used to go to youth group at my local church. And a couple times a summer, we would always go down to the Sandy Cove Beach. And we always used to have a campfire right there on the beach. We'd roast marshmallows, hot dogs, whatever it happened to be. And we always would sit around this same rock. It's a beautiful sandy beach. It's its own enclosed cove. And this one rock just stuck out because it's just there. So one day I was talking to a local guy, and he said, you guys always go down there and have your fires? Yeah. He goes, you know about that rock now, don't you? And I said, I don't really. He said, that's called Jerome's Rock. And I thought, oh, well, okay. I guess some dude named it after it. And he said, oh, no. Here's back in, we don't really know exactly when, but in the 1830s, 1840s, there was, this was a small harbor where people would come in and fish. And at night, the locals, of course, seen some lit up boat out in the cove. And that's all they saw. Didn't think any more of it. And in the morning, when some young boy went down to check the beaches and was just to see what he could find, he found a man lying there who couldn't speak English and had both of his legs surgically amputated somewhere below the knee. Now, use the word surgically loosely at that point, but he had been laying there all evening. They assumed that somebody brought him in on a rowboat and just left him there. And I mean, this is not the time when you could check genealogy or go on YouTube or Google or whatever and try to find it. And this dude lived there for about 50 years, didn't speak English, didn't speak Latin, didn't speak Spanish, didn't speak French. and would get really, really mad at most people when they get close to him. And he would just lay there, and yeah, most days he would just kind of lay in bed and hang out, but he lasted a long time. Nobody ever solved the mystery, but it was done by a skilled surgeon. They said when he was dropped off, the stumps were only partially healed and they were still bandaged. But of course, he'd been out there all evening and was suffering from cold and exposure. Nobody really knew. The best guesses that anybody ever had was that he might have been a sailor on a ship. Obviously, he was a sailor, and that he attempted a mutiny, which I thought was kind of cool. And maybe he was punished by amputation. It seems kind of, harsh. But anyway, somebody else said another suggestion might have been that he'd been an heir to a fortune and was gotten rid of for someone else to make room for the inheritance. And they said he may have had a traumatic brain injury, but they don't know. But that story has stuck with me ever since. I was a teenager at the time when I first heard it. And in my hometown, if you mention Jerome or Jerome's Rock, people tend to know. But not everybody knows what that rock there is there for. But 150 years ago, some dude, middle of the night, gets brought up on a little boat, dropped off by the rock, and just left there. Imagine. I can't even imagine. I mean, who knows? Maybe he was still recovering from the surgery, and he woke up, and all of a sudden there he was. But times they have changed, haven't they? I love that story of Jerome and Jerome's Rock. And someday I'll see if I can find you a picture of the rock. It's not super impressive by any means, but it definitely sticks up out of the sand. How about this one, guys? Again, this is another one from Canada. Anybody heard about the story of the washed up feet? Not washed feet, not stinky feet, but the feet that continue to wash up on beaches in British Columbia. Over the past 15 years, they have been finding severed human feet inside of tennis shoes or hiking shoes or anything like that. And for some reason, they continue to show up there. Lots of people want to say they think it's there's tons of possible. Faith one, that's a really good one. Faith just asked if the shoes in the feet were ever, if they were Jerome's or not. I thought that was really good. I like that. Anyway, caught me off guard with that one. No, I don't think they were. They would have, the footwear would have been, they would have had to carbon date it at that point. So the first foot showed up in August 2007 on Jebediah Island in Georgia Strait. Through a DNA analysis, the right foot was later linked to a man who had gone missing 4 years earlier. So at this point, this is where I figure it's probably Bigfoot, who has a taste for human flesh, but for some reason has an anti-foot fetish. I could be wrong, but this is my best guess anyway. Since then, at least 11 other feet have been found in the area, while three more have been found in Wanda Fuca Strait. Now, just recently, with this story, another one had washed up in Victoria Gonzalez Beach. As with the other cases, the foot was still encased in a shoe. Interesting. Imagine this. Imagine just out for your morning walk. You get your dog there, and you're taking him out in the morning, and he just comes back with a foot in a shoe in his mouth. And he's like, "Hey, Dad, didn't I do good?" "Yeah, maybe you did." Anyway, there's been well over 15 that they have found. They said it's not just a story north of the border. It's also been south of the border in the U.S. They said at least 21 feet have washed ashore in Salish Sea, both on the U.S. and Canadian side since 2007. However, none of the discoveries have been linked to foul play. They say they've been perfectly severed and don't show any sign of mechanical separation. I'd love to leave it there, and maybe it is. They say it doesn't look like it's non-natural, but for some reason, it sounds like the water there is extra cold, and there's certain minerals that will eat the body and completely decompose the body in a matter of 4 days. Now, apparently, the fact that the feet are in the shoes protects them, and as the rest of the body decomposes, the foot floats off and the shoe just goes to the surface. I mean, I think it's possible, but I'm going to go with Bigfoot or Yeti. I mean, we're getting close to the north, so it could be like the Abominable Snowman or something like that. Cabot Porter thinks that it's aliens. I don't know, but I have always been a sucker for Unsolved Mysteries, the show, and the fact that mysteries are unsolved. And they're way more fun when you don't know the answer, whether it's something supernatural or something slightly more mundane, like bacteria, minerals, and ultra cold water. But yeah, I just, to me, I could not imagine being out in the morning, walking along, and hey, there it is. Instead of picking up, sand dollars or crab or something like that, my dog comes back with a foot in his mouth. I mean, talk about putting your foot in the mouth, eh? Faith says they are coming through a dimensional portal, especially coming through the Juan de Fuca plate area. Well, I'll take that. I should, I should have turned on my fax machine this evening. Maybe we could have got some faxes from beyond the grave. Who knows? All right. Speaking of stories that were passed down over the years in my family, there's two. They're neither are unsolved, but they're creepy enough that I always appreciated them. And this first one, you may have heard me tell it on other shows before. I'm not sure if you have, but if I can remember the names correctly. Anyway, we have a hunting camp that we always go back to. My family more now than, my uncle and that, because we live way out here. But this is in Nova Scotia. And it's, I don't know, I think it's about an hour's walk in the woods. So it's a good long walk. And my uncle Jim owns it now, and he bought it from his uncle. And I can't remember his name right now. Anyway, we'll just call him my great uncle. And he would go back there pre-World War II and post-World War II. And this was before there was any, four-wheelers, three-wheelers, anything like that. It was you hiked in the woods and nobody else was around. And he would go in for weeks on end, and he would cut firewood, and he would hunt, and he would just enjoy himself in the absolute dark abyss that was the woods back then. And one evening he was laying in bed, and there was, nobody around anywhere. And all of a sudden, he hears a thump on the north side of the building. And he's laying there, and he's getting, he's like, did I just hear that? Did I not just hear that? I'm not really sure. And then he hears kind of a scrape and then a thump on the west side of the building. And then a thump and a scrape. And he's thinking, this is going to be the biggest bear I have ever seen. And he gets they had a little breakdown 12 gauge shotgun that they would keep underneath the couch. And it's still back there from the best I know. And he gets it pointed at the door just in case this bear decides it wants to come in and avail itself of some of the supplies that are in the cabin. So then he hears on the south side, thump, scrape, and it's getting closer and closer to the door. And he figures, this is it. I'm going to go out in a blaze of glory. Nobody's ever going to know what happened to me, but I'm going to shoot the bear as it is. And just as he's about to take a shot, he sees the profile in the doorway, and it's a man. Now, I don't know if I'd feel better, feel worse, but this dude had been, I still get chills hearing this story. It's the weirdest thing. This dude had been lost hunting for days in the woods. He got confused. He was heading in the wrong direction. And there was no artificial light out there. He had no flashlight, no nothing. And the dude was basically just running in the woods because he was so panicked. And he ran smack into the side of my great uncle's cabin, just like that. What are the chances? I could not imagine the fear that must have been on my great uncle's back. I get the cold chills. You just would not know. There is such a different time. Nowadays, it seems like there's people everywhere. Technology is around that you would expect maybe somebody would get in the woods and you would see them. But back then, it just didn't exist. And to hear that and to see that, that story still gives me chills while I tell it, guys. And then the other one was another uncle of mine. And this was in the summer of 1967. And they went to, I hope I get all the details right, but the spirit of the story is right. So my uncle went to the centennial anniversary or centennial birthday celebration of Canada I believe it was in Montreal at that time, 1967. Summer of Love. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't, but it was awfully close. And I believe it was him and his wife were coming back, and they hitchhiked, of course, because what else do you do in the 60s? But you hitchhike everywhere, smoke dope, don't wear a bra, and hitchhike. And they were on their way back, and they get into the vehicle with somebody who seemed like he was a little bit off. Now, again, in the 60s, there was lots of people around who were a little bit off. So to get into a vehicle where a guy was as high as Cheech and Chong combined wasn't necessarily a bad thing or an odd thing at the time. But this dude was absolutely, he seemed like he was from another planet or something. And the guy drove, and he was driving faster and faster. And my uncle was like, you need to slow down and let us out. And the guy looked at him and he said, oh no. He said, we're going to die in this vehicle today. Something along those lines. And my uncle was panicking and panicking and panicking. And the guy was driving faster and faster and faster. And just as soon as he got to the point where he thought, this is it, I'm going to die as a 22-year-old, whatever it happened to be, the dude stopped, he pulled over, and he let him out. And the guy got caught a few hours down the road somewhere. Turned out he was a wanted fugitive for murder somewhere else. What made the guy stop? What made him not crash, not kill, not whatever? For whatever reason, that day he decided that it wasn't going to be my uncle, and I believe it was his girlfriend at the time. I could not imagine. Good evening, folks. I see a bunch more over here. We got Jules in this evening. We got Backwoods Butcher. We got Rachel. We got Cabot. We got Faith. I seen we were up to about 35 live viewers, right? There's something fun about spooky stories. And we got Off Grid with Sugar Creek Homestead of Tennessee. Yeah, I could not imagine the story. That blows me away. So like I said, if anybody out there would like to join in on the live chat, you can call east of the Rockies, call 1-800, west of the Rockies, you can call here. Oh, we have somebody coming in that looks strangely familiar, almost like a King of the Hill character. Now, Dale Gribble, God rest his soul, he has since passed on, but I think we have somebody coming on here. Let's check him out. Good evening, sir. How are you?
How are we doing today? I'm just trying to feel my character a little bit, try to get into it.
Not too bad at all. So, guys, I have been bragging up this. We didn't have a name until recently, but we knew it was going to be a Ghost to Ghost special. And now it is known as Ghoulman Tim's Workshop of Horrors. And Kyle has said all along that he has a story or four to share with us. And so,
off now. This looks ridiculous.
So we have got him on, and I told everybody, you know the rules, Kyle. Love to hear your stories. Love what you're doing. What'd you come to share with us this evening on the Workshop of Horrors, brother?
So when we lived in the southern part of the state, Nicole had a house that she bought down there. But again, it's like just a small cottage. I think it was 700 square feet. Thing was tiny. And we lived there with 6 dogs and 60 birds. It was ridiculous. But I moved in with her, and I was bringing the last box into the basement, walked up the basement stairs, closed the door, and it had one of those hook eye locks. And I did that, and all I hear from the kitchen is, "Oh, no, don't do that." And I was like, "Why?" And she goes, "Oh, the house doesn't like it." And I'm like, "Excuse me? What does that mean?" And she proceeds to tell me that the house is super haunted. She's dealt with it a bunch. And that it seems to happen more when you lock the door to the basement. And I'm like, you're just telling me, you literally told me this as I dropped my last box into moving in here. Are you kidding me? That's insane. And we were there for probably about 2 years more, I think. And I never really saw anything. The couple things she had seen was an old woman in the kitchen. Like, she was asleep on the couch. At the time she lived there alone, was a ICU nurse in Boston. So she would usually just sleep on the couch with the dogs, like on weird shifts. And she woke up one time to the refrigerator door opening and then closing and then opening. And at that point, she stood up, and there was just like an old woman there, like opening and closing the door. And then she was gone.
Oh, my God.
Then she had about a sleep paralysis. That's a fun one.
The same evening or a different time?
Different time.
Okay.
So for people who don't know, that's essentially when you wake up and don't have, she's walking over. You don't have the ability to move, but you can still see and like feel everything. So for those who don't know, this is my lovely wife, Nicole.
Hi, Nicole. Great to have you.
Good to see you.
We're telling ghost stories this evening about your old haunted house.
Favorite.
I hate it. I hate it so much. I hate everything ghost. I hate like monster movies, like anything paranormal. I freaking hate it. I just have no time for it because it does freak me out in a way.
You're super scared.
I know. I'm terrified of them. I hate it. So then at one point we moved into the basement, like our bedroom into the basement. We wanted a king size bed, and the house was so small we couldn't even get a king size bed into our room. And so we moved into the basement. It was actually nicer, colder in the summer.
I just need to clarify to make sure we're in a haunted house that doesn't like you being there, and you thought the best idea would be to move into the basement. I'm just making sure we're clarifying.
Tim, you've met me now.
I have, yes. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Okay, we're on the right page here.
Burning, so we were good.
Like she had medians there and everything. Like there was something going on. So anyway, we're in the basement, and she worked nights, so I'd be home, sleeping at night by myself, and I'd be in the basement. And you have that feeling when, like, because I wear glasses, so when I take my glasses off, I'm completely blind in a dark basement. I'm not seeing anything. But you just have that feeling of like, there's something in here.
And when I would sleep during the day, the same thing. I don't have my glasses on, but there was twice I saw like a figure walk across the bedroom or basement.
I chalked it up to like, had a little too much wacky tobacco tonight. Not worried about it, because if I think it's real, I'm never going to sleep. And I went the entire time we were in the basement like that until we moved. And then very recently, like a year or two ago, we were talking about it. And she just goes, "Oh, I saw people all the time. Like there were things there constantly." And I'm like, "Thank you so much for not telling me. I would have slept in my truck."
But she didn't tell you until you moved your last box in at the house.
Oh, I hated it.
I love it. Oh my God. So was there any story behind the house? Do you know? Was there anything like some bad scenario or situation that may have happened there in the past?
I did a little bit of, light research, Dr. Google, I looked up. The family that lived there before me, a group of 3 sisters lived there and grew up. I don't know how. So a family of 5 lived in this cottage that was 700 square feet.
It was insane.
And so when I bought the house from one of the sisters, 2 of them lived locally. One of them lived in Florida, but she was unwell. She was dying. And I wonder if the old woman that I saw was her returning to the house and like being confused.
Right? This is insane. It's absolutely insane every time we talk about it.
But all the other experiences, I couldn't find no connection.
No. But then there was also weird things like our lab that we still have.
Oh, he had a mental breakdown.
Literally would go through random mental breakdowns. Now, one, he's an idiot. So there's that. We could chalk it up to that. But there was one where for a month, he wouldn't come into the house. Like he would just stay out all day barking at the house. Like he wasn't even barking like out. He was barking towards the house and would not come in.
And when he was inside, he would just shake.
He would shake and look at the corners of the ceilings. And I'm like, I hate all of this. This is awful.
What is it with dogs? I think they can see something. They can see another world or a slight, it's the whole color thing. I don't know, but they can see things and sense things that you and I maybe can't.
Yeah. I don't know. I went down a TikTok wormhole on that the other day. I saw one and then it just started sending them to me. And I'm like, I hate all of it. I hate it. Like, I don't like it at all.
I can't figure it out. I don't know why I enjoy this stuff. I'm a skeptic through and through, but there is something fun about not knowing. And I think that's what it is. My brain gets switched on by this stuff that doesn't necessarily have a reason,
And it's like, we're in New England. Like, we're in old New England where it's like, there's tons of this stuff. Like, we grew up with it to an extent in the White Mountains. There's a national park where we always used to camp. But up there used to be a town. And it was a town until World War II, when all the men from that town that got drafted it was one of the like big battles, and they lost essentially all the men in a town.
Oh my God.
And, but it's like, you go up there now, it's a class 6 road. Like, and we'd be bringing up, like, I'd bring up my Buick Century like just dirt roading on this thing. But there's cemeteries all over the place. You can find cemeteries, foundations, tons of stuff all the time. And there's a certain section that has a cemetery in it that's like, shit happens here. Like,
Really?
you deal with stuff. And we're up there camping one night. We were drinking. And we go and we get to that spot. I'm like, all right, we'll walk in. We'll see how it is. A little liquid courage. Let's do it. I think we're probably like 18, like riding up there. And I was in the back. And I felt about it then the same I do now. I'm not going to fully be like I'm not going to bitch out. But also, I hate every part of this. And if I die, I'm coming back and haunting whoever lives from this experience. Because now ghosts are real. So I can just do that.
Right.
But so we're walking and it's just this trail in the woods, super thick. And I still don't know. The girls who were up front were like absolutely terrified. They come back screaming. And at that point, I'm not going to stay to see what happened. I'm in the back. I'm in the back for a reason because I'm going to beat everyone to the truck. And whoever's not there is gone. That's it. But yeah, they were like, we saw something. I don't know what it is. It was about 6 feet tall. Like, we just don't know what it was. And I'm like, best case scenario, a bear, which is also a horrible scenario to run into a black bear in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains of like the north.
There is. Yeah, the stories that come out of the Appalachian Mountains just blow me out. I can't.
Well, like the true Appalachian Mountains, like down south.
Yeah,
that's nuts. But again, like we have that stretch up here, but it's again, old New England is just all of the craziest stories because this is where people just tried to survive in like colonialism for so long that it was like everyone's dying. So if there's a good chance they're going to be around for a bit.
Where I grew up, Nova Scotia.
Yeah, same thing.
400 plus years of history there. Now, I know that doesn't, it's not a drop in the bucket compared to England, but as far as North America goes, for settled communities, that's as old as it gets, brother. And some of the trauma. So here's a fun story for you that I just remembered. And this is the best part of this kind of show is that the stories come back to you as time goes on. So my parents, they got married in the late 70s and they bought the house next door to her mother, my mom's mother, my grandmother. And it was a house built, I believe, in the early 1930s. And it shows that section of it. It was just a tiny little house. And there was an old sea captain that lived there that eventually I think they bought the house. I think it was empty for quite a while. Mm-hmm. Anyway, my bedroom was on the far north side of the house, way at the back, far into the house. And as the additions were built on, mom and dad's rooms got further and further away from mine. So I had more privacy, but you're a lot further away from mom and dad if shit went sideways, right? Yeah. So one day, my uncle tells me this story and he goes, somebody was out by the house one day and they heard this nasty thump, just one big loud thump on the inside of your wall where your bedroom is now. And I was like, oh, okay. So they went over to check on this old sea captain and he had dropped dead in his bed right then, right there. So he must have swapped, slam out, hit the wall. Who knows what happened, just like a death throw or something. And I was probably 13 at the time. And you can imagine how impressed 13-year-old Tim was with finding out an ancient sea captain died in his bed. Well, not his bed, but his bedroom where his bed now resides. Mm-mm. So yeah, that shit. That's what it, oh, Jesus. Anyway.
Well, it's like there is good stuff about it sometimes. And I'll share this. This is a good one.
Yeah.
We had a death in the family at one point, like a close death. And when our second daughter was born, I had a moment where I took a break, went out and smoked a cigarette and just thought about, oh God, now I have another kid. Holy crap. And I had a couple minutes out there and I just talked to him. I just talked to him and in the parking lot of the hospital, whatever. And just look out for this, that, and the other. At the same time, unbeknownst to us at the moment, my best friend, his wife was in labor with his daughter. Our daughters are a day apart. Wow. So couple months after that, I'm at his house visiting with them, and his mom comes over, and his mom does, I think it's Kundalini yoga, where it's one of those things where it's like, it puts you in like almost like a trance of some point. And she was doing it because of like her daughter-in-law being in labor and just putting out good vibes and things like that. And what she told us was that person came to her in her like trance or whatever it was, because she was his teacher too, like when we were kids and everything. Like she knew him since he was a tiny little kid. So she knew exactly who he was. And he said, it's all going to be good. Like, it's all going to be okay. And it was like, I asked her what time that was. And I knew it, like I knew the time Julia had been born. And I'm like, I know I walked outside an hour later because I was like, holy shit. And when I did, like, it matched up to the exact time that I was in the parking lot talking to him, that he came to her in her vision, because it's like, I've called her mom forever, like, because I was always at his house and stuff like that. So it's like, that's crazy how that works out. And when it happens like that, it's like, I'm fine with that. That's cool. Don't walk up to me in my sleep. I don't like paranormal activities. Get the hell out of here.
That is cool.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Well, Kyle, thank you, brother. I really appreciate this. This was great. I'm glad you were the first caller on the wild card line this evening on Workshop of Horrors, because I knew you'd have some good stories, and I knew you wouldn't disappoint, brother.
I never do.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Take care.
Yep. Bye.
Bye. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. I knew Kyle would come on with, he'd bring straight fire. Absolutely. So remember, phone lines are open. And by phone lines, I mean, come along. Come on. You don't have to necessarily turn on your camera. You can just do audio only. You can even put in a fake name as long as you're serious and earnest with your stories. Because this evening in Ghoulman Tim's Workshop of Horrors, we are going to tell ghost stories. We're going to tell paranormal stories. We're going to tell alien stories. And we're going to have a hell of a time doing it. And as Kyle was talking about, you know, people reaching back from beyond the grave, no matter where you stand on it, I told you our motivation, inspiration for this evening's show was, again, listening to those old Ghost to the Ghost episodes by Art Bell. And Art himself always said, if he could ever find a way, I think for him, and Carrie, if Carrie's still in listening, Carrie Brown, he was a much bigger Art Bell fan than I was, of course. And it seemed like Art was always searching for something. He was searching for existence beyond the mortal. And whether he found it or not, I don't know. But he always said that someday, if he could figure it out, he would send a message back to his listeners. And, you know, it'd be cool if he did someday. Let's just leave it at that. So this is going to be an alien story from Nova Scotia, where I grew up again. And this is from a town called, I hope you're prepared for this name, Shag Harbor. And apparently shag is a type of bird, but of course we made fun of it in high school. But it's the most well-known UFO sighting in Nova Scotian history. So well known, as a matter of fact, that their postmark from the local post office is a UFO. So people will send letters there to get canceled by the postmaster to get that little symbol put on their stuff. And I think that is pretty cool. So they said, Shag Harbor, first indication of mysterious occurrence would come from local residents who saw strange orange lights in the sky the night of October 4th, 1967. Seemed like a lot of weird things going on for Canada's 100th birthday that year. Most witnesses agreed there were 4 orange lights that evening. 5 teenagers watched these lights flash in sequence. Then they suddenly dove straight toward the water's surface. The witnesses were surprised that the lights did not dive into the water, but seemed to float up on top of the water, approximately a half mile from shore. Witnesses at first thought it was an airplane crash, but the police quickly discounted that theory. Constable Pound made his way to the shore to get a closer look at the phenomenal sight. He was accompanied by another corporal and a constable and other local residents. They all clearly saw a yellow light slowly moving over the water, leaving a yellowish foam in its wake. Coast Guard cutter ship was immediately dispatched. Other local boats rushed to the spot of the sighting, but by the time they arrived, the light itself had disappeared. However, the boat crewmen could still see the yellow foam, indicating that something had possibly submerged. Nothing else could be found that evening, and the search was called off by 3 a.m. The RCMP, that's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, ran a traffic check that evening with NORAD and a few others and said there was no reported missing aircraft. The following day, the Canadian forces in Ottawa gave a report and said something had hit the water in Shag Harbor, but the object was of unknown origin. Always everyone's favorite. Whenever there's a cover-up, whenever there's a conspiracy, it's always unknown origin, isn't it? So the HMCS Granby was ordered to the location where divers searched the bottom of the ocean for several days, but never had any results of any import. The story was soon forgotten until 1993, as it started to, I think early internet days, started to kind of come back around. One explanation was that it was a Russian spacecraft that had crashed, while others explained the presence that they said would explain the presence of a Russian submarine in the area at that time. Also, there was a rumor of an American involvement in the follow-up investigation, and by involvement, it's implied cover-up, but there was no official statement beyond that. So back in 1967, 4 orange lights hovered across the water for what was about an hour, left an orange or yellow foam across the water, and nobody knew what happened. No sign of crash, no wreckage underwater, no missing ships, nothing. But a bunch of people, including 3 police officers who would be considered well-to-believe witnesses, all stated they saw the same thing. And the genesis for this episode, going back, was the very first episode that Carrie and I did in memory of Art Bell. And in that episode, I believe it was the first one anyway, in one of those episodes, I did a segment on the Phoenix Lights, which were, I believe, a triangle of lights that pretty much the entire city of Phoenix saw at that time. And I got, I believe, 2 different emails from viewers saying that they had witnessed the Phoenix Lights at that time. And I realized we've got enough of a community here that there's enough ghost stories out there that we can share them. So I hope you enjoyed that. I love UFOs. I grew up as a UFO X-Files junkie. I used to get paranormal magazines. There was this short-lived magazine. I wish I could tell you what the name of it was now, but it came out for maybe a half dozen issues. And for those who are younger than 35, a magazine is a bundled piece of paper you used to get at the store that would have your information in it, kind of like the internet, but even less reliable. And it usually took about a month or 2 to get to you. Anyway, I used to get them, and the one was on UFOs, another one was on spontaneous human combustion, all of that stuff, the creepy things. And I was the dude that would always go to the local library, and I would take out all the books on UFOs, and I enjoyed them. Conspiracy theories didn't matter, always something fun. So if anybody out there wants to even get on and share your favorite story, it doesn't have to be one you've heard, but your favorite unexplained or paranormal story you've heard. Cryptids, I love cryptids. I actually did some digging for some Bigfoot stories tonight, and we may or may not get to them. Who knows where we'll end up? But yes, cryptids. We've got the Mothman, we have the Yeti, we have the Jersey Devil, we have Bigfoot, Sasquatch, or Samsquatch, or Samskatch, whatever, as the Trailer Park Boys would say. But Faith K says spontaneous human combustion always scared the hell out of me. Yeah, me too. Because there was always these grainy pictures on the early internet that would claim that it was actually, go back further than that. Before I had access to the internet, I would go on badminton tournaments and things like that. And for some reason, I'd always have a little bit of money. And my idea was fun was that I would go and get like the daily news or whatever the worldly news they used to call it. The things that would say like Bat Boy born or, sounds of hell recorded, that kind of stuff. And I'd always get them. And there'd be pictures in there that'd be black and white, grainy as hell, but they would say that this was the result. There was always somebody in a rocking chair sitting there reading their newspaper, and they absolutely caught fire and burnt up. Oh, anyway. And Backwoods Butcher says he knows a guy who spontaneously combusted in a strip club, and we never let him live it down. Skunk Ape, Bat Boy, I don't know if I'm going to be able to pronounce this, Loup Guru. So I'm going to go Loop or Lou Guru in Louisiana. That means, and Faith says, somehow I read about it when I was young, like junior high. I'm 51. And yes, the rocking chair. It always seemed to be in a rocking chair or a padded recliner. And they would burn themselves down through, and it would scare the shit out of me. And yes, yeah. You know what, guys? I should have, if somebody can find that, there was, when I believe we were, it might have, I don't want to say who I think it might. I think it was at the workshop workday that somebody had just got a new video on Bigfoot. I think it took place in Colorado, and it was a fairly interesting video. Like it wasn't completely like throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing. And Evergreen says, and they always run upstairs. So this one here, this is another Canadian story. I thought I'd focus a lot on Canadian stories because I was hoping that since our listenership is overwhelmingly American, these might be some that you hadn't heard before. So here comes a word I'm going to attempt to pronounce that I'll probably butcher, but it's Anjkuni Lake, vanished village, Nunavut. And we have a gentleman in the back here. So give me a minute. I'll finish this story and then we will bring on our next caller. So in 1930, Canadian fur trapper Joe LaBelle. If that name doesn't sound like a Canadian fur trapper, I have never heard the name of a Canadian fur trapper in my life. Joe LaBelle was traveling near this lake in the modern Nunavut territory. Aware of an Inuit settlement in that area, he entered the community looking for lodging, and he found it completely deserted. In his search, he found meals that had been started and left abandoned, empty huts left stocked with food and personal possessions, a recent fire left smoldering. This sounds very similar to the Roanoke Lost Colony, a discarded repair of a junior seal skin that had yet to be completed, and no signs of a struggle that would have explained the whereabouts of the people. Whatever had happened had forced the entire settlement to abandon their location instantly. There were no tracks, and the most gruesome thing they found was the fact that the dogs were still there, but they were frozen solid because they'd been left in the weather for many weeks or days at least. Food, weapons, and clothing had all been left behind almost instantly. LaBelle continued onward to the closest telegraph office located several miles further on and reported his encounter to the mounted police to launch an official investigation. Their investigation took testimony from a trapper named Armand Laurent, another one that sounded like a trapper, and his two sons. When questioned, get this, guys, this is the best part. They said they saw a large cylindrical object that transformed into a bullet shape before heading toward the missing lake. At the village, the RCMP found the kayaks still on the beach, meals still hung over long dead cooking fires, and frozen bodies of the villagers' dogs. They'd also found that every grave in the burial ground had been opened and emptied. The headstones had been stacked in piles on either side of the graves, ruling out animals as the culprits. The RCMP eventually concluded that the people had been missing for about 8 weeks before they arrived, but they'd never come up with an answer as to why the settlement had been abandoned to its location, at its location. If that story doesn't give you ice cold chills up the back of your neck, I don't know what does, but I love it. Oh, I love stories like that. Now, one more quick comment here. Faith says there was a Bigfoot on Bear Independent video a couple years ago on the range. I will have to look that up, and maybe I'll have to get somebody on that witnessed it. Now, joining us on the wild card line. No, actually, east of the Rockies, you're on the air. See, hello, sir. Could you turn your radio down? How are you, Kerry Brown?
I'm doing good, buddy. How's your night going?
Really good. Trying to, keep the spirit of Art Bell alive for once in a while. Hey.
Exactly. Well, I'm actually legitimately a little creeped out right now because I'm in my workshop, so I'm not bugging Angel right now, and something has already fallen out of the loft. I don't know why, and I'm not making this up, guys. Either like this is.
I know you're not. I know.
I'm not.
I told everybody has to be legit. Yep.
Yeah. So something fell out of the loft. Now we went through it earlier today and organized it, so it was probably just something that just wasn't well placed, but there was that. And I keep hearing like thumping out here at the end of the shop, somewhere around the tree. There's probably just a raccoon or something out there, but all I got with me is a flashlight. I did not come 50 feet away from my home with any kind of defense. So, if it happens live on the internet.
That works for me. And you know what? It's just a sign that we're doing something right here. It means that we've scared up the right, the right emotions in people, and every little noise around the corner might get people a little worked up. That makes me excited for, as long as nothing really happens to you, Carrie, I'll be happy. So. Yeah,
I'm just going to try really hard, if it does happen, not to scream like a little girl.
Sounds good. I'll mute it, or I'll edit it out in post. How about that?
Thank you. But I do have a couple stories for you.
I would love some scary stories or unexplained stories this evening.
Yeah, I got, they're short ones, but I kind of cover the gamut just a little bit. So, naturally on the ambulance days, we're going to see weird stuff all the time. And, the majority of the time that I was on the truck was working nights or working 24-hour shifts. So, there's just something about, you see stuff at night, right? You see, whether it's just because you're so tired, or maybe because there's just more activity at night, or some kind of combination. But one that still stands out to me today was just driving the truck with my partner. We weren't on a call. We were probably just changing our post. Just driving down on the kind of like the south corner of the county, which is just inundated with Civil War history. Lots of plaques, lots of memorials, lots of energy of that sort down through there. And we're just driving down the highway, typical, 3 a.m. I think it was fall. I remember it being kind of like crisp and cool, and really like lots of stars in the sky, really bright and clean. And in the distance, I could see something in the road. And I was like, crap, there's something in the road. It was just kind of like this sort of white thing, maybe 3 or 4 feet tall. Couldn't really tell what it was. And I kind of just started to slow down. And my partner next to me, she's enjoying a nap while I'm trying not to sleep while driving. Yeah. And I come almost to a complete stop, and there was just this glowing white thing standing on the double yellow line right there. And I blinked a couple of times, and I was getting ready to nudge my partner and be like, "Are you seeing this?" And as soon as I looked over to look at my partner and looked back to the road, it was gone. So
what do you think it was? Oh,
probably a ghost, kind of like sort of the impression my brain makes now was that it was like a young girl in like a white dress or like a white petticoat or something like that. That was kind of the impression. And one of the kickers was, at that time, we did not have the dash cams on the trucks, and they came about like a year or so after that. And I was like, man, I mean, we hated having those on the trucks at the time because we felt like it was, an invasion of privacy, because it recorded us as well as it recorded the street. But that would have been one of those times where we could have manually activated it and went back to check. So that was wild. I had it wasn't really a creepy feeling, but it was, it was different.
So was it, this would have been near where you are now, somewhere kind of in the Knoxville area, or?
Yeah, I mean, not far, like 15 miles south of here. Yeah.
Okay. You want to make any guess on what kind of ghost? You think it was a good ghost, a bad ghost, anything like that?
I think it was just a young, maybe a girl or a young woman, kind of the dress looked to be anywhere from late 1800s to maybe like early 1900 era. Probably just there's, it could have been somebody who died young. There's a lot of stories about young women being widowed when their husbands died in the war.
Sure.
And then, some of them, they didn't want to continue going and they died as well, and things like that. So, but I mean, we've got a history center here that is just packed full of information. So if you ever wanted to like deep dive, Civil War history, turn of the century history around here, there's plenty of stuff to look up.
Well, it was such an emotional, I mean, not that wars aren't emotionally charged, but it was such an emotionally charged war with, friends and family fighting each other and just brutal violence. To me, it doesn't surprise me that there's people left behind in the in-between, or whatever you want to call it, from that kind of thing. Because, Art Bell always used to say that he felt like the ones that got left behind or stuck behind were the ones that came out of something in violence or abrupt, or you didn't really know, but there was something that was surprising or overwhelming about it,
Yeah. No time to settle up emotionally with the circumstance.
Exactly. And Faith says, they say women in white are women who went nuts and killed their kids, then killed themselves.
Well, that's pleasant.
That takes it from a semi-friendly section to so that's interesting. That's good to know. I've never heard that, but I'll take it. There's very little expert in that end of things. So, and you suffered from sleep paralysis before?
Yeah, it happened to me a few times right after I started working nights. It happened to me once, actually, when I was on duty trying to catch a nap. We try to catch a nap in between calls. And I remember being conscious and thinking that I was hearing the radio, thinking that I was hearing our unit number be called, and could not move, could not sit up, could not answer the radio, could not anything. And I finally did wake up, and it turned out that and it could have just been a dream, because they weren't calling us. It was, for once, quiet. And but it was bizarre. It only happened a couple of times. It happened one or two times at home, right as I was trying to get my body to adapt to working those kind of hours. And I'm glad they went away, because that was just it's terrifying.
I was going to throw it out. If anybody else in the audience or listening has suffered from it or has any stories, share them with us, because that's another thing. I don't know why I find that stuff so, I don't know, just intriguing, But
yeah.
Did you say you had a couple stories for us?
Yeah. There's a old mining quarry not too far from where we are. There's actually a bunch all over the county, but there's one that's sort of on the smaller side. And several years ago, Mom and I went down there to explore it. It's kind of between, it's kind of behind a church and a school that's part of the church. And you just you can park in the school parking lot, cut through a little section of woods, and then you're in this quarry. And Mom and I went back there because there's an old farm dump. So you'll find cool bottles and, tools, and you just never really know. And you just, we're weird like that. We look for stuff like that. And we've been down there for a little bit, just wandering around, and Mom hollered to me. She was like, well, this is kind of weird. Come look at this. And there is this, on a rock, there is some kind of offering or shrine of something that involves lots of red, I think paint, lots of red stuff. It didn't look like dry blood, it looked like paint. Skulls, weird. Oh, there's a baby doll, things like that. And there's the one thing that actually scares the bejesus out of me, and I can't watch stuff like this, anything that has to do with inanimate objects becoming animate. Can't handle it. Chucky stuff. I don't care how corny those movies are now. I can't do it. Anything with a weird, creepy baby doll or a puppet or something. No, I'm out. So yeah, so we saw that, and I think the baby doll was missing an arm or maybe its head or something. And Mom and I were like, well, we'll be going now.
Oh my God.
It was strange. Yeah.
You got a theory on it by chance?
It was probably just the high school kids going back there, screwing around, doing silly stuff. Probably went out there with a Ouija board or something. Although that's something you shouldn't mess with either, in my opinion. But, probably just goofy, kids messing around in the woods. But it made me feel uneasy. And that was enough to be like, well, I think we're done looking around here.
110%. That creeps me out, man.
Yeah.
There is something about, like you said, Faith says dolls and such are a nope biscuit for me. Hell to a nope.
Yep.
Oh man.
Yep.
I got a question for you. You
Yep.
listened to Art Bell back in the day, obviously, quite a bit. Do you and we talked about this a bit for his ghost to ghost and stuff, and it always seemed like maybe he was searching for something or wanted an answer to something. And I don't know, do you remember hearing him say, because I know I've heard it and I couldn't find a quote tonight, but that if he was ever able to, he would try to connect or communicate on the other side?
Yeah, he said that more than once. I mean, we're all ears, Art, waiting on you. I mean,
do you think he found it? Do you think he got his answer on the other side, whatever it happened to be?
Maybe like he's too busy being, reunited with Ramona and having a good time on the other side. So that would I don't doubt that he certainly had the intent, but who knows if you're able to, or what if we undergo reincarnation instead of like a heaven or a hell, and he's Art's off being somebody else or something else, depending upon how you get reincarnated. It's cool to think about. It would be really neat if you like had some guy call into some radio show, and maybe it doesn't sound like Art, but it's like the same cadence and all those kind of keys that you listen to, the way somebody communicates. That would be seriously cool.
There's been a couple of guys who have done AI based like new segments from coast to coast with Art's voice, and that alone was creepy enough,
Yeah.
It's interesting. And then there's have you heard of the spirit boxes? I think he talked about them on there before.
Yeah.
Those creep. Yeah, they are, whether they're legit or 100% bullshit, they still creep me out because they hook them up and they listen to radio signals and things like that and try to come back with something. That's all. I don't know. Anyway, to me, it creeps me out. So
yeah.
Oh, do you have any more stories for us, or was that it?
I got one more quick one for to cover our UFO side of things.
Oh, good. Okay, perfect.
So I think this was either the summer of 2020 or 2021, because it was when I was still mowing yards in the old neighborhood, and I remember this very distinctly. So I was mowing a yard, and the yard faces north.
Okay.
Which not all that relevant, but it was like middle of the day, so the sun was going to be behind me. If I'm looking north, the sun is behind me. It's like noon, 1 o'clock, somewhere around in there, and I can see this plane going over like what looks to be a passenger airline at really high elevation, like as high as they can go. Almost so high you can barely see it. It's just little more than light reflecting off of it at that point. But what was weird was that there were two, and it almost looked like a mirror image. So, we have enough like Army aircraft fly over where it looks like, I know what it looks like when they fly in formation.
Sure.
When they're flying just off each other's wing. This was most definitely a passenger airline, and if you imagine, like, if you can see this first plane like just below 12 o'clock, and the other plane is just above, but to my eye they look exactly the same size, which means those planes would have been flying within, I don't know, a few hundred feet of each other. Nowhere. I mean, passenger airlines don't fly that close to one another. We know
right,
that.
Exactly.
Crazy. So it almost looked like a mirror image. It was really strange. It almost looked like because the light was reflecting differently off the one on the bottom versus the one above it. And I got pictures at the time, but you really couldn't see anything with the way the sun was and the distance and everything, and scratched up phone lens and all that kind of stuff. And I went home and I told Angel about it. I was like, I saw the strangest thing. So, for the people who think that that the Earth is in an enclosed system, that there is no space, or the people who believe that, and they say there is this firmament that there is basically a dome, that made me wonder, like, was that plane so high that it was close to the top of the dome, and it was causing some kind of reflection or something. So
Interesting.
I don't know. It was weird. I don't
I
really
can-
believe anything one way or another. I just kind of like to explore it all.
Oh, me too. That's what I love. We were sitting well after dark at the Midwest Preparedness Festival there in Kansas this year, and we looked up and somebody said, "What the hell is that?" And it was, I took a picture, and it was a streak of two lights side by side. And if I hadn't have known what it was, it would have creeped the hell out of me. But it was the Starlink satellites being launched.
Mm-hmm.
But it looked like in the picture, of course, it looks like a streak of light, but in real life, it looks like a bunch of dots moving together. And there are those satellites going, and it's the creepiest thing. And I don't know what it is about unexplained things that you see in the sky that stick with you.
Yeah, especially in the daytime like that. That was what was so strange. Was
What do you think it was?
I don't, it was a really clear day because it's possible you can have light reflecting off of a cloud and things like that. I just don't know. Like I said, it looked like a large passenger jet, but both of them were moving in the same direction at the same speed. They weren't emitting any trails, so I couldn't really judge anything off of a trail. But like I said, one looked clearer, and the second one looked a little bit distorted, like a reflection in like a somewhat warped or bent mirror.
Interesting.
Funhouse mirror style.
That picture you took from a distance that really couldn't tell much would have fit in really, really well with some of those mid-90s pictures that Art used to put up on artbell.com. I think he would have appreciated that very much so.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Mr. Brown. I knew you'd bring your A game this evening. I love those stories, brother.
Glad to help. Good to talk to you, buddy.
Talk to you soon.
See you.
So what'd you guys think of that? I knew Carrie would bring some good stories. And oh man, still Jeremy One Step Closer says weather balloon. And I would venture to say it's possible, except that it was two of them and they were totally mirrored. So I don't know. Interesting. I don't have a clue what it could have been, but I still love hearing those stories. So if you guys have more stories you want to share, I've got lots more here, but keep bringing them. I just threw up the join link in the chat this evening. Come on by. We will open up the lines. We'll get your stories. No matter how inconsequential you might think they are, I would love to have you on just to share, because this is a hell of a lot of fun. And I'm glad that we've had Kyle and Carrie on so far. 1991. This is the disappearance of a cattle salesman. Vasil Georgiou, a 63-year-old cattle seller from Romania, vanished in thin air for 30 years. He was the type of guy who would travel from countryside to the city via train and to go sell cattle, go to auctions, that sort of thing. And in 1991, like always, he told his family, hey, I'm going to take the train and I am going to go look at some more cattle to auction. He bought himself a train ticket as usual, told his wife and kids he'd be back in a few days. That was the last time his family saw him for 3 decades. The family reported his disappearance to police, but nothing came about from it. So they eventually assumed that the man had met to foul play, and they held a memorial service in his honor. Fast forward to August 2021. On a Sunday evening, a car stops in front of the Georgiou's family home and drops off Mr. Vasil, who is now 93 years old. Unfortunately, the few neighbors who witnessed the scene were too shocked that they can't remember the car's plate number or even whether there was a driver in the vehicle or what the said driver looked like. It needs to be pointed out that Mr. Georgiou's was the only person who got out of the car. The driver never set foot out of the vehicle. Strangely enough, the man had on him the same pants he was wearing 30 years previous, and in his pockets, the family found not only his ID card, but his train ticket that he had bought 30 years previous. Everyone who knew him had noticed that Mr. Georgiou had looked pretty great. He was clean, well-kempt, and in good health, which means in all these years, he was very well taken care of. The only issues he seemed to be having were neurological in nature. More precisely, Mr. Georgios remembers his family, but is clueless about where his whereabouts were during the previous 3 decades. When asked by reporters and family where he was all these years, he replied candidly, "I was at home." What in the world happened there? The dude disappears. He get train ticket, ID, and pants he comes back with 30 years later, just like nothing had happened. Somebody dropped him off. Nobody knows what happened. I would love to hear whatever your guys' best theory is on things like that. And oh man. Hunter says, dealt with a crackhead that looks zombified. That's about it. Ooh, that's still pretty creepy. Anyway, yeah, there are, you see, and to not go too far down that rabbit hole, but you see some of the footage from San Francisco and recently from Vancouver, Canada, of the guys or the gals who are in, I don't know, some drunken or a drugged stupor. And you walk by them and they don't even know you're there. They might be standing there. They look like they're dead or they're hanging over something, but they're alive. And they look like some sort of post-apocalyptic wasteland that have been, affected by radiation or something else. But it's unreal. One step closer's best guess is a time portal. I mean, it's possible, except he come back looking 30 years his age. So like 30 years further on. So I don't know. It's just interesting. Did somebody take him and hold him until his brain was, mush and figured, man, I figured he'd be dead long before now, but instead he's still alive and they figured it was a good chance to drop him back off to his family. I'll never know, but rather interesting. How about conspiracies, guys? What are your favorite conspiracies? There's one recent conspiracy that I've been kind of interested in, and I don't get lost down the conspiracy rabbit hole too often, but have you guys heard the story about some corporate conglomeration that's been buying up farmland near U.S. military bases? Because to me, it's rather creepy. And I don't know. There's no real story behind why it's happening, but it's rather interesting. And if you haven't heard it, check this out. A mysterious investment company is buying up large tracts of land around a California Air Force base, raising questions about who just happens to be behind it. And more importantly, what is their intentions? Amid growing fears about Chinese businesses acquiring land near military sites. The investment firm Flannery Associates has bought nearly $1 billion worth of land near Travis Air Force Base in Northern California, which is midway between Sacramento and San Francisco. Flannery Associates filed a lawsuit in May against a group of landowners, accusing the farmers of conspiring to inflate the value of the property, drawing further scrutiny from policymakers. Here's the thing. This is what I found out. There has been, reading some of these other stories, this Flannery Associates has been approaching farmers who don't have their land for sale. And they're like, hey, how much money is it going to take for you to sell us this land that just so happens to border U.S. military bases? And the farmers will say, no, I don't think I want to sell it. And they'll say, just name your price and we will buy it from you. And then when they named an inflated price, they took them to court and said, you're asking for too much for your land. We want some of our money back. Anyway, and so this is what's been going on. Since 2018, Flannery, a registered as an agricultural company, we're going to put air quotes around that for those in the audio only, has purchased more than 50,000 acres in Solano County alone, according to public records and detailed maps obtained by The Hill. The acquired property runs directly up to and adjacent Travis Air Force Base. How crazy is that? Evergreen Farm says probably backed by Bill Gates. Yeah, you probably wouldn't be wrong. So, and Jules says, yes, they've been doing it for decades. Texas, South Dakota, and Florida as well. A host armed, let's see. We have no idea who they are. This guy says Flannery Associates is opaque. In other words, they're not very see-through. We have no idea where the nearly $900 million at this point has come from. They've bought over 55,000 acres of land in the area, and it raises a major concern. No shit. The firm claims that 97% of its investors are U.S.-based, but the source said there's no way to verify that claim. The business registry, this is where it gets even just a little more slippery. The business registry address for the company is located at a packaging shop in a shopping center in Folsom, California. There just seems to be so much twisted, weird stuff going on with that story. I don't even know what it is. But that conspiracy definitely jumped up and grabbed me, and I don't know what exactly was going on, but rather interesting. So I hope you enjoyed that. So I dug into some ham radio. So this evening's episode, like I said, has been an homage to Art Bell, but it also kind of incorporates two of the semi-weekly segments that I do on here. First is I read it on the internet, some of the best posts I find from the internet for you guys. And then other ones are stranger than fiction, some of the interesting news stories that I find out there. And so I put into Reddit some of the best ham radio mysteries that we could find. And these ones were pretty good. Some of them have the usernames, some of them don't, but I enjoyed every one of them that I found for you. So this one comes from user Death Metal Banjo, which is great. Said, I was tuning around late one night on 4 megahertz and came across a gentle Mr. Rogers-like voice saying things like, Daniel, can you hear me? There are people here who want to speak with you, Daniel. You need to tell us where you are. We are here to help you. He continued to call Daniel's name, but no answer. No call sign, no station ID, no names or anything. Just, Daniel, can you hear me? At one point, you could hear someone crying in the background. Whew, that one gives me chills, folks, and I enjoy it. This one comes from user, please don't judge me. In the late 1980s, I was listening to Radio Jerusalem on shortwave, and they stopped regular programming and made an announcement. They said that there were incoming rockets and everyone should put on their gas masks and go to a safe area. The announcer then said, be sure that your children's gas masks are put on correctly first. That's a true to life story, but it's still creepy as all get out. How about this one here? This one wasn't a ham radio, but this was another post from Reddit. This was Violent Orifice user. Standing outside a convenience store late one evening, I saw 2 different cars park about a minute or 2 apart and go into the store. It was obvious the 2 didn't know each other, or at least that's what was implied. After shopping for just a minute, without purchasing anything, they each left in each other's car. Still can't explain it today without going down the CIA conspiracy route. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? What would you do if you were sitting outside of a convenience store late at night doing your best Jay and Silent Bob impersonation, and you see 2 random strangers who at least act like they didn't know each other, pull up to the front, go inside and shop, quote unquote, for a few minutes, hop back out, and then get into each other's vehicles without a word spoken and drive off? Weird shit going on there, hey? How about this one? This one was from a deleted user, so I couldn't credit them for this. I was driving one night in a really foul mood and speeding. Like when I say speeding, I mean at least 25 over the limit. And that's 25 in freedom units, which is like 40 in these fake Canadian units we have, right? Anyway, this car gets behind me, and for some reason, I can just tell it wasn't a cop. It was a full tinted Chevy truck with weird lights on it, like comically large aftermarket front headlights. Once it got behind me, I got a really eerie feeling. I couldn't explain it. Like my body just knew something was wrong. Anyway, I figured if it was a cop, they'd light me up for speeding. But for some reason, they just kept pace with me. On and on I went for miles. They were speeding just as fast as I was. And at this point, I'm getting more than a little weirded out. So I turn off the freeway, and they choose to follow me as well. I turn into a gas station, and damn it, they pull in behind me. I figure if I'm going to get axe murdered, at least the cameras will pick it up and give my family some closure. Something just didn't sit right with me. I knew something was up. As I'm getting out of my car, the truck's windows roll down. And what I saw still haunts me to this day. It was a dude that was heavily disfigured. Of the likes, I could only compare to the guy Rocky Dennis from the movie about a guy with a crazy disfigured head who falls in love with a girl who loves him for who he is and not his face. And he starts to motion with me motioned to me with his fingers, like telling me to come closer, come closer. I don't care if he was going to give me the winning Powerball numbers. There was no way in hell I was going to approach his car. I bolted inside to the gas station. At this point, my whole body is shaking. I try to tell the clerk what's going on as they stare at me, probably thinking I'm drunk or high off my ass, as my story didn't make any sense to anybody but myself. I look outside and the truck is gone, and I still have nightmares to this day. That story creeped me the hell out. Faith K says strangers on a train, and Hunter says not quite a dead drop, talking about the Jay and Silent Bob car switch from the previous story. But yes, strangers on a train. I believe that's the Hitchcock movie where two strangers meet and agree to murder someone for each other so that it's completely untraceable. An interesting concept for sure. How about this one? Did you guys ever hear that there was a UFO story in Chicago at the O'Hare Airport? I thought this one was kind of cool, and I hadn't heard it before. It was another one that I came across on Reddit today, and I wanted to share with you. This was a newspaper article, and it said the city of Chicago isn't known as a hotbed of UFO activity, but O'Hare Airport is the home of one of the most publicized sightings of the last 10 years. A flying saucer-like object was spotted over Concourse C of the terminal in November of 2006 by pilots, management, and mechanics. The incident was reported by Chicago Tribune columnist a few weeks later, noted the object was first seen by a United ramp worker around 4:30, and after that, a variety of witnesses said the object was dark gray and 6 to 24 feet in diameter. Some people said it appeared to be spinning like a frisbee, while others said it wasn't rotating at all. All agreed the object was silent and appeared just below the 1,900-foot cloud deck of that day, until shooting off into the clouds and leaving a circular hole shape in the clouds. Interesting, hey? And Faith K says the O'Hare sightings were recent, and Illinois has a lot of sightings, and Hunter hadn't heard of this one. The story continues. This is a quote from a guy named John, a mechanic. But I know that what I saw and what a lot of other people saw stood out very clearly, and it definitely was not an Earth-based aircraft. A manager on Concourse B ran outside his office after hearing the report about the sighting on an internal radio system. He said, I knew no one would make a false call like that, but if somebody was bouncing a weather balloon or something else over O'Hare Airport, we had to stop it because it was in very close proximity to our flight operations. The story was eventually picked up by many major media outlets and caused people to reconsider the idea of UFOs, though the FAA and the airline refused to investigate the incident. Again, this is what happens, right? These creepy stories, something that's unexplained, and government organizations say, nah, we're not going to bother, are we? Creepy. The FAA dismissed the incident as a weather phenomenon, and astronomers agreed, saying the weather conditions at O'Hare that day were right for a hole punch cloud. In other words, a cloud with a hole punch through it from an aircraft going through. No shit. That's exactly what people saw. The UFO, or something like it, passing through the cloud and leaving a saucer-sized hole in the clouds. But it doesn't, whether the clouds were perfect for it or not, it does not infer or doesn't negate another unidentified flying object that was seen by tons of people who would be considered, valid and not insane. And this is where it all came from. There was a Reddit comment, and it said, not me, but my dad threw bags at United in Chicago for 2 decades. He was at Gate C during the famous UFO incident, and he said, without a doubt, it was a UFO. He and everyone else, including pilots, were pulled in by a bunch of suits and told to not speak of it or they would be fired on the spot. Interesting, hey? And Faith says, yes, that's what's different about the recent O'Hare ones. They were viewed by several air traffic controllers, not just civilians, people who should know what aerial phenomenon necessarily look like. And Cabot Porter says, astronomers talking about clouds. Strange. I just want to go back and make sure that I read that right, guys, because it said, Yeah, here it is. The FAA dismissed the incident as a weather phenomenon. Dr. Mark Hammergren, an astronomer at Adler Planetarium, agreed, saying the weather conditions at O'Hare that day were right for a hole punch cloud. Interesting. Jules says she had a truck follow behind her for over 300 miles on my way back from Kansas last week. I finally got him ahead of me so I could get a photo of the plates. He immediately fell back and disappeared. It's funny you mention that, Jules, because when I was coming back from Kansas, from the Midwest Preparedness Festival, going to see Becky in Nashville, I was at the second half of my day, so I made it as far as St. Louis. For 3 or 4 hours, I had a Jeep, like a Jeep SUV, follow me. And no matter, I kind of just would speed up and slow down a little bit, and they seemed to hold on to my speed. And I just happened to notice them eventually because the vehicle looks similar to Carrie's. I think he has a Grand Cherokee. I might be wrong. And eventually they pulled off, but they followed me for long enough that it got a little uncomfortable. And I was wondering, what the hell is going on? And of course, just when you think that, off it goes. This one here comes from user Kensington. And before I share this one, I've got this one, and then I've got a file to play for you at the end here, guys. So if anyone else has a story that you want to share, I will share with you the live invite link here one more time. I'd love to have one more person come on if phone lines are still open. And if you'd like to get on, click this link now and come in. And if not, you got to wait 12 months until next year's Workshop of Horrors, brought to you by Ghoulman Tim. But we'll see. We'll see where we end up here, guys. So, Kensington, this is an interesting one. I was at home alone watching TV. I had it running through the stereo. Suddenly, it starts to get louder. I look at the stereo, and the volume is counting up. I had it on 12. It's at 18. Now 19. Now 20. Counting up at a steady pace, I think to myself, fuck, I set on the remote. I raise my arse from side to side to find the remote, but it's not there. 33, 34, 35. The TV is now incredibly loud, and I glance to my left just in time to see the remote drop from head height in thin air down onto the arm of the sofa. What do you think of that? That would creep me the hell out. How about this one? I was camping alone in the middle of the plains in North Dakota. A storm blew in, and I was stuck in my tent under some trees, and I got a super strange feeling. I had 2 phones on me at the time. One had internet, and one was for navigating, and the other just had cell reception. 2013. All of a sudden, one of the phones start ringing, and I look at the caller ID, and the call was coming from the other phone, which was closed and in my other hand. Never touched a button, never pushed a button, never sent a signal, but in the middle of the night, in a storm, in North Dakota, in a tent, and one phone calls the other phone. I don't know, folks. So the entire theme of tonight's show, like I said, was done in the spirit of Art Bell's old Ghost to Ghost episodes. And Art, like I said, was obsessed with something from the other side, wondering what it was, what was going on, whether there was something there. He would ask stories. He would be genuinely interested in people's near-death experiences and things like that. Always a lot of fun to listen to. You could tell he was genuinely interested. And he would always say that if he ever had the opportunity, he would attempt to contact his listeners or people on the other side. And I thought, So anyway, I came across something today, putting this show together, that I had never heard before. And it is something that I have no doubt in my mind that Art Bell absolutely would have loved. He was a showman first and foremost, but he loved the paranormal, and he loved ghosts, and he loved things about stories coming back from the other side. So I came across this video. I pulled some audio out of it. I edited it down to make it 90 seconds. So hopefully that will, I won't be too long that it will, carry things away. But this was done by a YouTuber named Huff Paranormal. And I spoke of it earlier, but he used a spirit box. And he used a spirit box the day after Art Bell died. just as soon as he woke up in the morning and he had around 15 emails from listeners saying, hey, Art always said that if he ever had the chance to connect or communicate from the other side, that he would do it. And they figured when would be the best time, but the day after Art Bell passed away. So YouTuber Huff Paranormal used a spirit box. He hooked it up and listened to the airwaves, and this is what he came back with. Make sure you guys can hear this. It's 90 seconds long, and we'll give it a listen. Tell me what you think, and make sure you can hear it.
Hi, let's prove this. You're talking. You can help me prove.
The time has come.
What do you see, Art?
Some they don't think it's.
I'm going to focus on Art. I'm going to focus on him. I'm focusing on you, Art.
No.
Do you train?
Let me say.
There you are, Art.
Art. You
Come on, Art. You can be heard. You can be.
You said some time.
You believed in ghosts.
When
What do you think of it now?
too large.
You hear? Where are you? Calling on Art Bell. He passed away last night. Yes. Today. Come on through. I know you're Art Bell. Have you received answers, Art? Hi. Let's prove this.
I don't know. All I can say, I know Hunter says, where's closed captions when you need them? I could probably hear it a bit better on my end. And it doesn't mean that whatever it happens to be, like I said, Art said he wanted to communicate from the other side. And in there's a couple of things where you can hear pretty clearly. And one is, hi, I'm Art Bell or something like that. And then the sound slows down. And toward the end, the guy had captions on the screen. And he said that he could clearly hear Art say that this is not the end. And whatever that means for whomever it is, it gave me a bit of cold chills when I heard it, because I thought that blew me out of the water. Carrie says that is wild. Was that a bit of bumper music coming through too? I think so. There was quite a bit of it, and I cut out a lot of the dead time just so it wouldn't, just for brevity and time constraints. But I want to believe this evening, just like Art Bell believed in the 90s and the 80s and the 2000s, up until his death in 2018, that he was going to come back. He was going to do his best to communicate. And I hope whatever the answers were that Art Bell was looking for, he found them. And hopefully he just was able to give a word or two and say, hey, it's not the end. So whatever else, I love these type of things. I love these stories. I love the brain twists that this does to a person. I love that it makes you think outside the box and expand your cranial thinking. How about that? It just allows us to think, hey, maybe there's answers that we don't even have the questions to yet. And hopefully whatever else Mr. Art Bell, who is, in the airways in the sky from the other side, might be listening on, might be every so often be able to sprinkle his voice out over the airwaves in the high frequency ham radio. But I appreciated him, and I hope this show honored his legacy that was Ghost to Ghost. I hope you guys have an incredibly spooky Halloween. And spirits willing, we will have another rendition of Workshop of Horrors brought to you by Ghoulman Tim's next year. So with that, guys, stay spooky, stay scared. See you next week.